Can you believe that in 2022 there are still people who have not read The Lord of the Rings? It's wild, right? Well, I guess all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Let's go ahead and talk some Tolkien, guys. Hey, what's up, bookworms and hobbits and elves and dwarves and men and all those wonderful things from the land of Middle-earth, guys? We're back today to talk some Tolkien. Today we're going back to 1954 with the beginning of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This is, of course, Fellowship of the Ring. 17 years, guys, after The Hobbit, the sequel. So he took his time, and it really did evolve along the way. But you guys, can you watch the Hobbit review if you want to know kind of how he got to this point, or why you should read J.R.R. Tolkien. I recommend both. But guys, this is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. In fact, spoiler alert, guys, this is my favorite fantasy series of all time. So I think you know how this review is going to lean, because this is my favorite book in this trilogy. So there we go, guys. But it was this series was intended as one work. It really was. And the publisher didn't really mandate as much as during World War II there was a paper shortage. Sound familiar? And so they had to break this up into 3 volumes. So he originally wanted one work. It was going to be 6 books within the book, a prologue, and 5 appendices. But we got what we got, which was the 3 books with, the 2 parts, or however you want to kind of break it up, you can do that. But what can I say, guys, about the Fellowship of the Ring that has not already been said? Well, we're going to find out, but we're going to begin like usual, guys, and let's talk about what is this book about now. In ancient times, the Rings of Power were crafted by the Elven Smiths. There, Sauron, the Dark Lord, forged the One Ring, filling it with his own power so that he could rule over others. But the One Ring was taken from him, and though he sought it throughout Middle-earth, it remained lost to him. After many ages, it fell into the hands of Bilbo Baggins, as told in The Hobbit. But years later, in the sleepy village of the Shire, young Frodo Baggins finds himself faced with an immense task, as his elderly cousin Bilbo entrusts the ring to his care. Frodo must leave his home and make a perilous journey across Middle-earth to the cracks of doom, there to destroy the ring and foil the Dark Lord in his evil purpose. Guys, this takes us all the way back to 1954, the Fellowship of the Rings. Now, guys, with this, obviously, there's going to be a ton of good here. Let's start off with what makes it good or bad, beginning with the good. I got to say, first up, guys, the world, obviously, that he has crafted here. While I think that most fantasy that we read feels about our Earth, 600 to 800 years ago in Europe. This is the first one I think that I read. I mean, obviously, I read this much earlier than most of the other fantasy, but this was the first one for a lot of other readers who it felt like a different world. Really didn't feel like a play on what had happened here. It really just felt like completely different, something that we could never ever. Besides like having men in it, humans, it didn't really feel anything like our Earth. So Middle Earth was very much its own thing, but it just truly feels like another planet. And I think about the chapter concerning hobbits. Now, I might be wrong on this. This is just something I always kind of heard. I always heard that concerning hobbits wasn't in the original release of Fellowship of the Ring. I was just told that this was something the publisher had requested to kind of help people understand this culture and stuff, because he wasn't real explained. Like, if you try to read that book now and you don't have the concerning hobbits chapter, you're kind of be like, what are these? So I think it did really help. So I don't know if that's true or not. That's just kind of always what I had heard. But yeah, I think the concerning hobbits chapter really sets the tone of, okay, these are different. These aren't quite dwarves. These aren't quite humans. What are they? They are something very, very different. But there's many things about them that you grow to love over the course of the series. And it all begins right here with this chapter. But many things that he does in this world, it just sounds just absolutely magical. I love the way that he did the majesty that he describes the elves with from the eyes of Frodo. I think that's something that really helps you kind of sink in of what they are singing and how it all seems so magical to them, and therefore to the viewer it feels very, very magical. But obviously, guys, the big thing here is the characters. Look, so he follows up 15 central characters in The Hobbit with 9 central characters here in this fellowship. And each one of them has their own little thing. Where I said one of the down things of The Hobbit, if I had to be critical on it, is a lot of the dwarves didn't feel a little differentiated, because none of them ever had a scene without one of the other dwarves, especially the ones whose names ride with them. I feel like most of them, at first, you might kind of feel like Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin kind of all starting to feel like the same. But I think, we have some of the chapters like the Barrow Wight and obviously Tom Bombadil, where I think you do start to get a little bit of differentiating of those four. And then, of course, you got your mixing of cultures here with the main cast of the Fellowship. You got dwarves, you got elves, you got men, you got a wizard. You got a little bit of everything. And I think that just kind of shows, the mix of the cultures here and the races that he has in the land of Middle-earth. It's just a melting pot here. They're throwing these characters together, and then you see like a lot of the ancient histories that they have with one another are kind of slowly unfolded. And I think that is really just kind of what makes it go. And it really is all of that. And guys, I gotta say, the politics in this are great, because I think the Council of Elrond is like the gold standard of all like fantasy moots or any kind of council that you can imagine ever. I think everything has kind of spoofed off of this. I mean, even Frank Herbert did it with that dinner scene, I think, was very much inspired by this. But it just kind of shows how these cultures are all not on the same page. I think it shows that they know that they need to come together for this greater cause, but the temptation's there for everybody, and showing that they need to work together. But hey, elves and dwarves, they aren't really getting along. The lands of all the different races of men are all like, okay, they're antagonistic towards one another. And then you got Gondor that's right there on the very steps of Mordor and stuff. So it's a lot of tensions and stuff, and I show that that's really built up very, very well. So I really think that it shows like how the volatility of this land, and this, like I said, the resentments that they harbor for one another, even in this potentially world-ending cataclysmic kind of event here. Because I say cataclysmic. I don't think I can say that word, so I'm just going to kind of move on here. But the character growth in this, I think the hobbits, they learn to conquer their fear, and they learn to, fight for their companions. That's something you wouldn't expect. I mean, these are people who are very, very, like you learned with Bilbo in the first one, was that they are very much comfortable at home, drinking tea, reading books, eating, second breakfast, these kinds of things. So when they go out there into the real world, they never had to face any real aggressors, outside of like Sam's garden. They never had to face any like real aggressors, So it shows that they do slowly start to do that. And they no questions asked. They will dive in head first to protect one of their mates, and that's something that, just like with the Hobbit, you do start to get that bond of this fellowship. Yeah, there is tension within the fellowship between numerous characters, but I do think that they all start to genuinely care for another by the end of this book. And, does it last? Well, you got to read and find out, guys. Another thing I think is it shows our characters how they deal with grief and loss, and kind of when you're up against odds that seem insurmountable. Those are things I think that really build these characters to where I feel like at the end of this first book, they feel like different characters, most of them, especially the hobbits, than they did when the book started. They already feel changed in this first book here. But guys, it's the themes in this. Friendship, temptation, treachery, all these things. I mean, this fellowship does have tension, but I do feel like there are some strong themes of friendship. Obviously, Frodo and Sam is probably the biggest one in this entire series, obviously. But you feel that friendship with a lot of the characters, and you slowly, even in this book, start to see that developing friendship between Legolas and Gimli. That's one of those kind of things. I think that the movies didn't really do it as fast. I think as the book, it really starts to kind of thaw their relationship, even as early as this first book here. But that's a joy really to watch. Temptation, obviously, you see that Boromir is a great man. He really is like the best of us, but even he cannot stop thinking about the ring. It's just so powerful. It's temptation. It doesn't matter how good of a heart that you have. It's just all encompassing. It is powerful. And I think it really shows that by giving us a character that is very much a white knight and showing that it can even corrupt the best of us. And then treachery, of course, the stuff that you find that Gandalf kind of goes through in this book. There are all kinds of themes. I think those are the three biggest ones here, but obviously it's always about the journey here, and I think that that's something that Tolkien did better than anyone. And it's the reason all these years later, you still have people trying to copy, just adventure, because this is quest fantasy at its peak. But I gotta say, the overall tone of this, yes, he will describe Middle-earth as this truly magical world, but it also is very, very dangerous. You can die at any moment, and it always has that ominous tone. Even though the Sauron is not like really present on the pages here, you still feel his presence somehow. It always feels like over the next hill could be something really, really bad. And I love that feeling, that atmosphere that this book has. It has it from really much from the moment they leave the Shire it has that feeling of something ominous is on the way, something is looking over us, and I love that. So, but I also like that sense of adventure from The Hobbit does continue here. You do still very much like, look, Hobbit is considered a children's book. This is, I would call, adult fantasy. It has a lot darker themes, and it has a lot of things that will make you be like, oh, that's much, much darker, obviously, than The Hobbit. But it does still retain that sense of adventure. You can still have fun in this series. It's not like so super serious that you can't enjoy yourself. I think you can quite a bit. But guys, is any book perfect? Of course not. Are there some bad things here? Well, that kind of depends on a certain point of view, but not all that glitters is gold, right? So here we go, guys. I think that Tolkien's writing style is not going to work for everyone. I think I've already mentioned this before, but I think he's quick on the action, but he's long on the description. And so some people are upset that he will spend, 5 pages describing a hill and 3 sentences describing a battle. That does happen here. That's the type of writer that he was. And I know that a lot of people like to use the word dry when talking about Tolkien. I wouldn't really consider it dry. I think it's just, if you've been reading nothing but modern fantasy and you try to go back to this now, yeah, it's going to be a little jarring. I think anything that's this old is going to feel jarring because people wrote differently decades ago, guys. I mean, you go back to the 70s and some of the writing style feels weird. You don't think going back to the 50s or earlier is going to feel like a little jarring for you? So, yeah, I think that could be expected. But, I also think that the politics can be a bore for some people. I mentioned that dinner scene in Dune. If you found that scene boring, which I don't understand why you would, but it happens. There are some people who find that scene boring. Yeah, some of those people might not like the Council of Elrond scene. To me, because I think it does an incredible amount of world building. It does some back history, and it talks about things that we haven't seen yet. It teases some things yet to come. But I can see how some people might not be intrigued by a bunch of, different races just sitting around and talking about what to do about this ring. So I think that one's just, your mileage is going to vary on that. It just kind of depends on how you feel. But I think that the in-world politics are great. I think it really does kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. Stuff that it was kind of hinted at in The Hobbit, but you never really got full discourse. For this, you really, really do. But let's go ahead and move along to why I think you guys should read it. Look, guys, this is the gold standard of quest fantasy. This is it. This is the adventure. This is the party system. All those things, the traveling band of warriors and elves and dwarves and men, everything that was kind of, this was D&D before it was D&D, guys. This was it, So I think that anytime that you can get back to our roots, I always say, reading the pillars of fantasy. This is the pillar. This is the foundation, I believe, of fantasy. And like I said in why you should read J.R.R. Tolkien, is that I don't feel like, obviously, Mr. Tolkien did not create fantasy, but he's the one who brought it to the masses and gave it its staying power. And you can see why in this story, because, guys, there are things, if you go and read Fellowship of the Ring tomorrow, you're going to be like, oh, this happened in this and this series that I love, because it all was influenced by this. So I always think it's very, very important to do that. And I also think if you felt like The Hobbit was a little below your age, you thought maybe you were too old for it or something like that, I think you're wrong. But I understand people who do believe that. I think this might be a little more for what you're looking for, a little more up to speed for you. And also, I say, if you love the movies, guys, I talk to so many people still like, oh yeah, I love the movies, but I've never really read the books. Do yourself a favor, see what the inspiration was. Treat this like a director's cut. I always say, you already got the faces to go with the names. Hey, you got the soundtracks too. You can listen to those while you read, because I think that listening to music while you read is obviously something I really am crazy about. But those soundtracks are just brilliant, right? So they're terrific for just about anything. But yeah, I think if you really did enjoy the movies, you love this world stuff, you've already got the visuals to kind of go along with it, I think that you would do yourself a service by going ahead and checking this out. So, guys, some final thoughts here. I've always listed this as my favorite in the trilogy because I love beginnings, guys. I love beginnings and I love character work. And in the beginning is when you are establishing your characters, and I feel like they get the most character work. I'm a character first guy. So I think that this is the one where it really does kind of build on, obviously you get a little bit more built on Gandalf that you didn't get in The Hobbit. And then of course you get to learn about Frodo and some more things about Bilbo and things like that that you didn't really get in The Hobbit. I love the way that he does it. He really does give each of these characters kind of their moment in this book. And that's what I love about it, because I do love characters, and I love that he continues the themes from The Hobbit, of leaving the comforts of home for a greater good. Now with Bilbo, obviously it was, a sense of adventure, a calling, kind of things like this, where this is like, no, kind of like the fate of our world could be in your actual literal palm here. So I think that it just kind of continues those themes with a much more sinister kind of ending. But guys, again, he just does Journey of Self-Discovery so much better than everyone else. It asks that question of what would you do if pressed? You know, it's one of those things we always think, I want to think that I would pass this test with flying colors, but you never really know until you're pressed. Well, this kind of shows what would happen if you were pressed in there. Would you, cower in the corner, or would you stand up and would you fight that cave troll? That's the kind of things that I think he really experiences here through the eyes of Frodo Baggins. And it's just a great, great venture. Guys, this is an all-time classic. I think that everyone should enjoy. So I don't see any reason at all why you shouldn't read it. But again, it is one story, guys. So it's really going to be hard to say, well, read book one. And if you don't like that, maybe you should. It's one of those kind of things like you'll know right away if you like this or not, if it's going to be for you or not. I think that you should push through, and if you're struggling, maybe after a while the writing style will click for you and you'll get really, really into it. But guys, again, if you love the movies, I see no reason whatsoever why you're not going to end up liking these books, because like I said, you already have the visuals and the lands, you know the map by heart probably at this point, you know the journey, and this is very much the inspiration obviously for that journey, and I think that you guys will like it just as much if you give it a chance. So guys, that was Fellowship of the Ring. Next month, guys, we'll be tackling the Two Towers as we do that lead up to Rings of Power on Amazon. And like I keep saying, regardless of how you feel about Rings of Power on Amazon, I have waited so long to do these Lord of the Rings reviews, so I'm glad that I'm finally getting to do them leading up to the release of Rings of Power this fall. So Two Towers next month, and then of course, obviously, The Return of the King the month after that, leading us in to September. So guys, Fellowship of the Ring, have you read it? What did you think? Drop in the comments and let me know, and I will talk to you there.